Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself. Gents, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast.
Cheers. Glad to be here. Very exciting.
Well, yeah, it's good to finally get you boys in the studio. We connected maybe, six or so months ago?
About in January, I reckon.
Yeah, that's right. I was very fortunate to do an episode on your podcast, which is one of the things I want to kind of start off with chatting about today. Would love to know how that kind of happened. What was the origin of the Big Bros podcast and how did you guys get that together?
Look, I don't know, Jeremy, was it like the evolution of every other broadcast? Well, you're out on a night out, or was it a bit more wholesome than that?
It actually wasn't on a night out. It was back in a COVID walk, I remember. I think we were specifically walking around E Gun Reserve in Caulfield, and we said, we were having great conversations at the time. You know, it was COVID. And I think that's when a lot of the insightful conversations started to unfold, at least for us, because there wasn't much to do. And we just said, you know, we're in our 20s currently. We always loved the voices that were a little bit older than us, those voices that would speak a lot about the relatable uncertainties that they would be going through in life, whether that was mental health, relationships, navigating life transitions. And we just thought, we loved to talk about those things ourselves, and we wanted to make that digestible and relatable to an audience that was similar to us in age as well.
Yeah, I think a massive part for me was, at least I have an older brother, and a lot of the advice or perspectives that he would share, they were always way more relatable than if, for example, my parents would share it, because he was 5.5 years older. So he went to uni. So 5.5 years later, I go to uni. You know, he has a relationship. 5.5 years later, I probably have a relationship. So that kind of age gap was really, really helpful. And I think at the time, what Jeremy and I recognized was a lot of people don't have an older sibling. They don't have someone where they can almost guide them and not necessarily tell them what to do, but say, hey, this is what's probably going to happen the next few years of your life. This is what you should expect. And this is what I learned from my own experiences.
And show you what not to do as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
And so you're about, I think I saw it was 180 episodes in, something along those lines?
About 124, 125.
Just a bit under, but yeah, around the 120s for the moment. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what would you say, I'll get you guys to both answer this one. What has been the most impactful lesson that you've taken from the pod so far? Might have been a specific guest or a specific conversation, but like, is there one that really stands out to you guys so far?
I mean, I think I'll let Jeremy answer that one, because I feel like you've developed, I don't want to speak on your behalf.
Yeah, well, one that I really come back to and I think about almost every day with the pod is that, and I think we've spoken about this as well, Danny, is that you can't have resilience without having love for something. And that's what the pod has taught me most through the guests that we've spoken to, through our conversation on the podcast as well. And that's a common theme that a lot of people come back to. It's that if you truly love something, you might not see the results from the start, and it might take a while to get there, but you have to have a core, deep element of love in order to pursue something and to stick at it and to have this unrelenting dedication towards a task. You have to truly love it, because it's all good and well to start a task, but if you don't really love it and you're a little bit iffy and your eggs aren't fully in the basket, well, you might reach a point where you think, hey, I'm reaching challenges at the moment, and you don't have that almost like that fire under the bum to just keep you going and to like propel you to keep on going. But if you've got that love, you've got that desire, then it will be unwavering and you'll just stick at it no matter what. And so for me, that's the biggest lesson that I've learned so far about it through our conversations and also through our guests as well.
Yeah, I mean, just having a think about it, there's been so many cool guests that we had. We had Bradley Dryberg on, who kind of shared his story with cystic fibrosis, running a marathon and kind of this sheer resilience. But something that, like an overarching theme, something I've thought about is the whole idea of faking it till you make it. And the reason I love that idea is because you hear a lot of the time that no one really knows what they're doing. They practice something, they implement a new strategy, a behavior, and they don't necessarily have the evidence to suggest that it's going to work out, right? So a lot of it is just a leap of faith, and the brain can't actually differentiate fact from fiction. So if you're visualizing and you're putting yourself in a situation where you perhaps have made it, it can guide a lot of your decisions in the right way. So you don't have to rely on the fact that it may or may not work out, but you can start imagining a future where things do work out for you and you get really, really specific. So I think faking it till you make it and just, we've recorded now for 2.5 years, and I think that's been a bit of like an unconscious mantra for us. It's just doing it until, just doing it for the love of it, not having any expectation, which removes it gives you a sense of freedom as well.
Allows you to detach.
And I think that's been something, not just in our podcast, but something I've been trying to tap into in my own personal life with other ventures and so forth.
Yeah, I really like it. They talk about the saying, like, you have to see it to believe it, but it's truly the opposite way around. You have to believe it first to be able to see it. And I think it's essentially not even faking it till you make it, right? I know we talked about this when I came on your show, like that law of vibration and operating from the frequency. Like, one of the things I said in our coaching group the other day is that you cannot attract anything that you don't already have, which sounds fucking stupid when you say it out loud. But from a vibrational frequency standpoint, you have to have it first. That is the fastest way for you to attract it. And I think the other thing I probably mentioned on our episode was that reality is always catching up to who you're being, right? And I know we spoke about the fact that most people are just reacting to what's in front of them, and that's who they're being. So there's nothing for it to catch up to. And so having recorded for 2.5 years now, what do you feel? I know I asked about the lesson, but is there been any changes in yourselves individually that surprised you the most, that you didn't expect when you started the journey with the pod?
I think you can start to be confident when you want to be confident. You don't have to wait for a specific moment. You don't have to wait for a specific time. It's like the whole idea of being happy as well. Like a lot of people say, don't let your happiness stay at a designated goal. You can choose to be happy. And I think that's kind of been the same mindset with, like, for example, being confident, saying things on camera, knowing that people might criticize you, but also just sticking to your guns. I think becoming confident in yourself is always going to be nerve-wracking, sitting down, talking on a camera. I think before we started, we thought it's going to be easy. How is it any different just having a regular conversation? But 120 something episodes in, you learn that you can choose to be confident. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to be a myriad of things, but you don't necessarily have to wait for things.
Of course.
I think that choice, though, to add on to that of confidence comes from that undeniable stack of proof that you keep doing those things. So then you can choose to be that way, or that you've put in the reps. It's like being in the gym. You're not going to be confident to do a heavy set on the bench press without working your way up to that, to putting in the reps to get up to that level. So no one's going to be confident with the first 10, 20, even maybe 50 episodes of a podcast, because you haven't got that undeniable stack of proof and evidence that you've put in the work to get there. But by the time that you have done those early sets and you've worked your way from 40 kilos on the bench to 60 to 80, and then you've got that 100 kilogram bench press that you're finally getting up to, you're going to be confident because you put in the proof to get there. So I think that's what's changed for us. What's changed for me certainly is just that ability to feel a little bit more legitimate about it, because you've got that proof that you've built your way up there. Because if someone just says to you, be confident, mate, you're not going to be confident. You're truthfully not, because you have to prove it to yourself almost.
Yeah, confidence is built through action.
Yeah,
not talking about action, but actually taking the action. And on the topic of confidence, I'd love to understand, obviously 2.5 years ago now, how old are you both now?
25.
Yeah,
25?
Yeah,
sweet. So you were, 22 and a half when you first started?
Yeah.
What would you have said your biggest vulnerabilities or insecurities were individually before you began? And do you feel like you've been able to navigate those in a way where they're no longer an insecurity or vulnerability for you now?
It's a good question. I think something that, and it's probably something I still struggle with to a certain extent, albeit it's not as pertinent. And I think the podcast was a bit of a good exposure therapy in that regard. But I think I was always a little bit preoccupied with what others might say or what they might think of me. And in a lot of ways, I knew it's an irrational, and most fears and most things that we're insecure about tend to be irrational. And it wasn't like the main reason why we started the podcast, but it was one of those, it was like a byproduct, right? If I start the podcast, I can start exposing myself to potential scrutiny, and how comfortable can I get with that scrutiny? What would that do for me? And I think as time has gone on, I've been able to almost reality test some of those own kind of insecurities that I have. And I think when you're 22, 23, that is a very natural thing to be experiencing, right? You're trying to find your way in the world. You're trying to get respect from others. But part of that is also understanding that not everyone is going to necessarily like you, agree with you, and respect your opinion. But I think getting comfortable in my own shoes was a massive kind of step. And, you know, it doesn't have to be podcasting. It can be anything. It can be putting yourself in the public arena where you can almost, you can showcase your ideas, but that opens itself up to scrutiny. So I think that's definitely been a byproduct for me.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned almost that fear of reputation and that fear of people perceiving you differently, because I feel like mine is more relating to my language and the way I talk. And I think Ilan's been really, really strong with that from day one. He's always had this eloquence with the way he talks. And for me, that was my thing that I was most insecure about. I was most insecure about maybe being perceived as someone that's just a little bit too blokey, someone that maybe isn't as eloquent the way they talk, because we listen to the top podcasters in the world. We listen to people like you, and all you hear is such eloquence in the way people speak. And you think, is that now what I need to be like? Do I need to be that voice of reason, that voice of affirmation, that voice that doesn't have ums and buts and pauses in the way they speak? And I remember when I was first editing the podcast, and I remember editing out a couple of the ums and buts, editing out a couple of the silence and those pauses. And then you just reach a point where you think, hang on, that's the authenticity in the conversation. That's what makes the conversation real. It makes it raw. It makes it genuine. And again, coming back to confidence and coming back to putting in the reps, naturally your voice evolves. Naturally, the way you speak evolves. Naturally, you become a little bit more convicted in how you say things. Your ums and buts start to peel away a little bit. They'll still be there because we're still human, but it gets a bit better over time. So I've almost learned to embrace that, because that was a big insecurity for me at the start, and still is to an extent now. There you go. But you get better with it over time. And yeah, I've learned to just embrace the rawness. Don't shy away from stripping away the ums and buts when editing, and just with more repetitions, you just have that, again, undeniable stack of proof that you will get better at your task. And oftentimes your insecurities won't even be noticed by everyone else.
I mean, 25, super young, 22 and a half, even more super young. What was the intentional desire for you guys before you started the pod? Did you have a clear idea of what you wanted to do with your life or your career? And I think it's something that's always going to evolve anyway, but has that changed from prior to starting the pod to now? We'll go with you first, Jeremy. What was your overarching North Star or goal prior to starting the pod?
Yeah, well, I was off of a gap year. I finished school, went on a gap year, learned a lot, met a lot of people, came back, started uni in COVID. I was studying physiotherapy. I still am a physiotherapist now. I love my job. I love interacting with people. And I think that's why it goes hand in hand with the pod. I love learning from people. I love having conversations with people. And you do a lot of that as a physiotherapist. I love problem solving. So that was what I was doing from a study lens now. I'm now working in that. But I started the pod as a student when I was studying, when I hadn't had that work experience yet. And I think just with each year of doing the pod, I feel like it's actually made my job as a physiotherapist so much better in terms of what I get out of myself and what I am able to get out of my patients, because you are in a room with someone treating them for 30 to 45 minutes and you have to talk to them. You have to make conversation. You have to almost build rapport and get them on your side and make them feel comfortable in that space. And certainly the pod and developing those communication skills has helped that. And it's just given me this extreme fire in the belly to just want more, almost to just want more from the podcast, want more from conversations with people, want more from putting myself out there and bettering people around me as well, and learning more from others around me. And yeah, just developing that skill even further, because it's something that I've always been attracted to. something that I believe Ilan's always been attracted to as well is that ability to change someone's day through conversation, that ability to pass on some form of knowledge that they might not know about, or it doesn't even need to be knowledge, but some form of relatability that they just need to hear from a lens that is a little bit more digestible, or it's just a little bit more comforting from what they might have heard in the past. So yeah, doing the podcast then to now and working in this space and having more conversations, it's just enabled me to feel even more hungry about the podcast and about just overall conversations with people and bettering people's lives, and in turn, feeling that fulfillment myself as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit similar for me as well. I'm also in allied health. I'm finishing off my master's of clinical psychology. Been studying for 7 years in a row. So it's one of those aspects where I first went into uni thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was doing arts, wanting to transfer to law, picked up a few psych subjects, and I was trying to be as intentional as possible as a 19-year-old. Didn't have a gap year. So I thought may as well make use of this and not let the HECS debt pile on. Too late for that now though, unfortunately. But I realized quickly that if you want to, and look, this might change, this perspective very well might change, but for me, it was it's not about finding your purpose through a job. It's about finding something you can enjoy doing, where you accept that there's going to be a bit of difficulty and hardship, but understanding that you'll be able to tolerate the hardships and difficulties of this domain better than other things. So for example, I was never going to become an engineer because I hate maths and I hate all the stuff that might be associated with engineering and so forth. So I went kind of balls deep with psych, and I found that when you go balls deep with something, it kind of has a better return on investment. And for about 3-4 years, did my undergrad, did my honors, and then applied to do my master's. And it was during honors that I started the podcast. So for anyone who's doing honors in psych, they'd know it as probably the most research intensive year aside from a PhD.
Yep.
And at the time, it was that's when the podcast started to evolve. That's when we started putting out episodes. And a big thing about doing psych and being a psychologist is that there's a huge emphasis on not having a massive public profile, because you're seeing a variety of clients, and there's this element of wanting to have a bit of mystique, more or less for about protection.
Yeah.
You don't want clients necessarily stalking you, finding you. I remember kind of grappling with that. I had some people telling me you shouldn't have a podcast, you shouldn't have a public profile. Other people said, well, it actually might enhance your work. And to be honest, it's been the latter so far, albeit I'm only on placement. There's a whole skill that you generate from podcasting to do with public speaking, being able to articulate yourself well. And for example, this year had a placement in a hospital, was doing a lot of group psychotherapy, delivering psychoeducation about the most kind of basic things, but it needs to be delivered well. It needs to be delivered in an articulate way. And I found that the podcast has actually been quite helpful in that way, because you're forced to simplify what might be a complex idea at times into its most digestible form. So hopefully it stays that way. Hopefully it only keeps improving kind of both arenas, because I feel like the podcast has made me a better provisional psychologist, but I think me being in this space has also made me a better podcaster, or at least I hope.
Brilliant. Are you boys both in relationships at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah. I know you've had some really good guests and some insightful stuff on the pod around the whole relationship side of things. What's something that you feel like you've walked away with from those conversations that you didn't before?
Such a good question. Yeah, it's definitely a theme that we love to talk about, because if I'm not mistaken, Ilan's been in a relationship the whole time whilst we've had a podcast. Me, I was in a relationship, and then I was single, and now I'm in a very different relationship now, which is incredible and very different to my first, where I learned a lot about my first, and just learned that, it wasn't for me, but so I learned a lot of lessons coming out of that. And I think that's what, I guess, when we have these episodes on the podcast and we speak about relationships and we speak about dating from the lens of a guy, which, we might not often hear a lot about on the internet, a lot of it has also served of help to ourselves, which a lot of the topics are on the podcast. We think in terms of thinking about your target audience and thinking about people that listen to you, we've always said that we want to talk about things that we ultimately find helpful to ourselves and to our own lives and that we find interesting. And hopefully that brings a pack of people along with the ride with us. And so when it comes to the relationship conversations and dating conversations, certainly that's been a big help for the both of us, a big help for me as well. And it's really evolved from what we spoke about then to what we speak a bit more about now. We discussed a lot about dealing with certain breakups, how to deal with, heartbreak and breakups, but also the nitty gritty about, when it's too soon to move on, which was a recent episode, because that has always been something where we've noticed within our friendship group, for example, a lot of people might think that, they've gotten out of a relationship that they know that wasn't good for them, but they think, what is this person going to think about me if I already start trying to find love again and put myself out again? Is it too soon? Is it something that is just going to cop a little bit of bad reputation? And we dive into episodes like that and topics like that, because that's ultimately what's helped us in our journey as well. And what we find that is really helpful, not just for the guys out there, but for the girls to hear from a male perspective as well.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because you're right. We have had a few people in that space come on and talk about the idea of dating. Something that kind of has always strung with me is the idea of never settling. And I think Mark Manson had this whole kind of litmus test, which is before you get married to someone, you should ask yourself, do you want to get married to them? If the answer is anything but a, F yes, then the answer is no, ultimately.
Yep.
And it's funny because we recorded an episode yesterday about there's this fear that potentially you might not find love. You might be in your 20s. You've just had your first relationship and that's gone down. It's broken down for whatever reason. And you have this very legitimate fear that you're not going to cultivate another relationship. And perhaps you're also in a state where you didn't want to settle. So you ended up terminating your previous relationship. That's the cost of doing business if you don't want to settle. But it's a very important cost, right? Because what's better is to be alone than to be in a relationship that is unfulfilling. And I think in our own friendship group, this is something that we've spoken about a lot. It's like, would we rather be single or would we rather be in a mediocre relationship? It's like Chris Williamson, one of our favorite podcasters, he talks about the beta region paradox. And it's like, things aren't so bad, but things aren't so good. So you're stuck in this lull. And it's like, you can apply the same analogy. You might be working a job. It's not terrible. It's got some perks. You get your 4 weeks of leave, but you don't feel existentially aligned with the work you're doing. And it's not lighting a fire up your bum. So what do? Well, you'd almost want things to get so bad that you have some sort of impetus to leave. And I think it's the same thing in relationships. I think the most dangerous relationships aren't the ones where it's necessarily abusive or toxic, albeit it can manifest into those aspects. It's not what I'm necessarily saying, but I'm saying there's like this hidden danger when things are too mediocre because there's no impetus to change. Why would anyone want to leave?
It's comfortable.
Yeah, that's it.
It's comfortable and familiar. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned, you guys have both mentioned a number of times the word fear. One of the best ways that I like to look at fear is false evidence appearing real. And so I think even on our conversation, we talked a little bit about beliefs. And so what has been a belief in the last year or so that you had to change? Because I think I always talk about the belief loop of whatever our belief is, regardless of whether it's true or false, we will experience evidence to support it, right? And so the belief will usually lead to the thoughts will lead to the actions will lead to, or the inaction will lead to the outcome, which reaffirms that belief. So has there been a belief that majorly stands out to both of you that you've had to either let go of or reframe, and throughout that process, understanding that, as I said, fear being false evidence appearing real, because we will always find evidence to support what we're looking for, whether it's true or false, whether it's what we want or don't want. If you're looking for it, you'll always fucking find it. And so what has been a belief for both of you guys? I'll get Ilan, you can jump in to go first, man.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's been kind of a few, and I love the whole idea because this is essentially confirmation bias in a lot of ways, isn't it? I think it's the whole idea, and for me, it's understanding that I do deserve good things. And if I'm getting a little bit vulnerable, sometimes I spoke about the insecurity before about being maybe a bit fearful what other people might think or say about me. And not necessarily that I've overcome or undergone this like tremendous hardship or anything. But I think sometimes if you're insecure about a number of things, you might start to doubt what you deserve, what you can achieve, and your own sort of achievements in life. And I think something for me that has been really cool is being able to reality test that and tell myself like, well, why don't I deserve something better? And that doesn't have to be necessarily in the podcast space. It doesn't have to be in my academic space. It can be in so many other things, like your relationships, your friendships. And I think for me, it was understanding that you might have this software inbuilt in you that tells you, well, you don't deserve good things. You might end up self-sabotaging. And I don't think I ever really had a history of self-sabotaging, but I think I had this kind of dormant belief that told me, well, you're not going to get into that clinical master's course. There's so many other smarter kids than you and smarter adults than you that deserve that place because it's notoriously competitive. That was one aspect where I had to almost convince myself, no, well, you do deserve it. And I think over the span of the last year of, undertaking the placements, of putting in the work in the podcast, developing certain friendships, it's been a great kind of evidence for me to show that like you can put enough work into something, and sometimes doing more work isn't necessarily the most useful thing. But I think just challenging that belief that says you might not deserve the best things in life has been helpful for me. And actually reminding myself, I think something that Jeremy and I sometimes chat about is that we don't give ourselves credit for when we do achieve something good. We're way more likely to be harsh on ourselves if something doesn't go our way. And I think what's helped me overcome that limiting belief is actually reflecting when something good goes our way, because it's, as you said, it's an undeniable stack of proof, but it's very easy to forget the good times, the evidence that goes your way. And I think actually it's like one of the things you talk about in cognitive behavioral therapy. You find the evidence for and against a belief, a good and a bad belief. And for me, it was trying to find all the positive reasons, all the negative reasons, and then reinforcing it, some sort of action.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly jump in there for 1 second because we had Jules London last week or the week before. I don't know if you guys have heard that episode, but he touched on a number of similar things. And particularly, I know we're going back a little bit now, but particularly what you mentioned before around things not being bad enough for someone to make a change. And so essentially sometimes if you use, let's say, an alcoholic as an example, rock bottom is kind of the best thing that can happen for them, right? Because without that rock bottom, you could essentially go on for 10, 20, 30 years just being below that rock bottom, which essentially just deteriorates your whole life, right? But with the worthiness side of things, the way that someone explained this to me once, which I don't have kids yet, you guys don't have kids now, but imagine having a child, boy, girl, whatever, and would there be anything that they could do or not do, which you would look at them and say that they're no longer worthy of what they want?
Of course not.
Of course not. Yeah. And so it's no different for us. And I think beliefs, worthiness, it's a decision. And one of the things that I've spoken about with my coaching group a lot lately, which has been really impactful, is being able to get clear on your self-image at the same time as being able to let go of parts of the old self-image, but letting go of those parts of you in a way that is from a place of positivity, empathy, kindness, gratitude. Because I think more often than not, as we continue to evolve, and you guys will continue to experience this, and you already have to a large extent, when we continue to evolve, there's parts of our old self-image that want to hang around, right? Because essentially you're kind of letting go of a piece of yourself. And when we want to make that change, more often than not, we look at those old parts of ourselves in a negative light. And it's almost like, oh, fuck, I'm embarrassed or ashamed of that version of myself. But the reality is you couldn't have been any other way. It's very easy to look at that version of you now and go, wow, can't believe I used to be like that, or why did I do that? But you didn't have the awareness that you've got now. And so I think that worthiness piece really is a decision. It's like, what is the self-image that I want to lean into? Because without that shift, there will always be resistance. If you've got, let's just make up a random fucking analogy here. Let's say you've got 10 parts of the self-image and 3 of them are from years ago. 3 of them are from the old version of you, or the version of you that maybe wasn't as confident or didn't have as much self-worth. And you're trying to strive for this level over here, this North Star. This part of the old self-image is going, what the fuck's going on here? This is not us. Like, we don't belong here. And so that subconscious kind of pull is always going to keep pulling you backwards until you're able to let go of it in a really, really positive light. And so I think what I don't even know what point I'm trying to make here, but the self-image side of things is extremely important. And as you said, that your ability to believe you're worthy of whatever it is that you desire is the overarching factor of whether or not you do or don't attract it. Because I think the best case example here is celebrities, right? You look at a movie star who millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world absolutely love and adore. And there's still people who take their own life, or there's still people who then self-sabotage or who have no relationship with themselves, even though there's hundreds of millions of people across the world who absolutely adore them. And so the only thing that matters really is that image you have of yourself, which can be continually built. And as we've discussed, like the action is what builds that confidence there, but it is a decision. And I think if you're watching or listening at the moment, it's a decision that only you can make. You either do believe you are worthy of what you desire or you don't. And no matter what the fuck I say or whatever these boys say or anyone, none of that will ever change that until you make that decision yourself.
You mentioned self-image there, but self-image with the approach of empathy to your past self. Such a coincidence, but also not a coincidence because it is such a relevant topic, but something that we spoke recently with a guest of ours, Lily Ford. She spoke on our podcast about battling a past addiction and how she used to hate herself. She used to hate her past image, and she used to wake up in sweats and wake up in nightmares and fears about her past self because she was so ashamed of that past image. And she was thinking, this was my past self. How can I then become the person that I want to be now? How can I be perceived as someone different? And she spoke about that fear of being felt and being seen that way by others. And then she said that the biggest shift for her in moving forward and to getting to the point where she's at now, where she's loving herself, she's loving her life, she's loving what she's doing and the people around her, is by approaching that outlook on her past self with a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, a lot of love, recognizing that without having that past self, I could not be the person that I am now. I could not be the person that I'm going to be in 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years time. So it's almost about embracing that past self and showing it love and empathy and recognizing, that was a past version of me. It doesn't mean that is me. That is not who I am to my core. Correct. That is just a past version of me. And just like a book, we have different chapters to our lives, and without that chapter, we can't get to the next one. So it was such a good conversation about that, and seemingly a conversation which is so relevant about showing the compassion and love to your past self, and then allowing that to almost transition into the butterfly effect and respect to the butterfly effect to get to your next self as well.
100%. We're not too dissimilar in age. Well, you guys are kind of fucking making me feel old now, but would love to know, based off, you guys, I guess, observing friends groups, feedback from the pod, what do you feel at the moment is the key struggles for men in their early 20s? What are the things that tend to stand out, whether it's your own experiences? Obviously, all three of us would have a pretty good idea of what our experience has been with it, but are there any major ones in this kind of day and age that stick out to you guys? Again, whether it's from feedback from the show or just your own observation?
I think a lot of men struggle. We know that there's stigma when it comes to men opening up, when it comes to mental health. I think one of the biggest issues is that there isn't a legitimately good male role model. And I think, for example, if you saw in the last few years, the rise of people like Andrew Tate, for example, he essentially, what I believe did was fill a vacuum for a lot of young men who maybe lacked a father figure, who lacked a sense of understanding of how a man should behave in this world. And I think that the problem with that is there's a lot of men nowadays who are quite lost, who are confused and not sure what values they should have, how they should behave, how they should interact with others. And I think nowadays the problem, I guess, not even necessarily a problem with masculinity, is you got kind of two sides. You got people who are very ashamed of just being men in the first place. And then you kind of got the polar opposite end, where you could call the toxic masculinity aspect, which is, it's the complete opposite. It's the brashness. It's what the masculine attributes should be, but completely weaponized and almost like this corrosiveness. And I think a lot of men are confused which way to fall. They look at it as like a binary option. I think, And I'm hoping that with, increased awareness, greater awareness of being able to open up about men's mental health, there'll be greater opportunity for more conversations. And I think we're lucky in Australia as well, because there has been a lot of emphasis on this topic and it seems to be growing. I think though, with time, if there is a male role model that does appear, and it can be anyone, because it's so hard to find one, and I might go a long way. But with that being said, I think there's a long way to go.
Who, just before pass you, Jeremy, who's been your biggest role model?
I've had a few, to be honest. I've never been like, my dad in a lot of ways, truthfully, like he's a musician by trade, so he's a pianist. So there's a lot of aspects about him where I love his creativity. I love the passion he exudes when he plays the piano and how passionate he can get on that. On that. But then, I'm a massive believer that you don't need to necessarily have one role model. You can take attributes from a variety of different people, because everyone's going to be different, good at different things,
For sure.
My older brother, in a lot of ways, his work ethic, massive thing for me. And even in our own friendship group, we've got one of our good friends owns a business, and seeing how tireless he is when it comes to, working on it night and day. That's a massive thing. So, and then even other people who just their kindness, their empathy, people in my own field, they're people that I feel like you can aspire to be, but you don't necessarily have to be them. You can take the attributes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you don't need to find necessarily this one global figure that can be that figure of inspiration for you. When I look deep into, I guess, the male role models in my life, for me it was my grandfather. He was quite old, quite elderly, passed at 96 a couple of years ago. But the reason why, when I think of a male role model, he was so pivotal to me, was because, like you mentioned there before, Ilan, you mentioned the confusion men have in not knowing how they can actually be a man. Are they meant to take one side? Are they meant to take another side where they're a little bit ashamed? Or is there some flow in the middle? And that's why my grandfather was and always will be that role model for me, is because he had that perfect blend of being in that middle, where he had those traditional masculine values, and he cared for his family, he provided for his family, but he was also the most gentle, sensitive, open man that I'd ever come across as well. Not afraid to show emotion, not afraid to open up about his feelings, not afraid to cry at times and to mention how he truly felt, not afraid to put his guard down. And that's why I think he will always be that for me. And that's, I think, what we try to provide on the show as well. We try to provide that outlook that men can be that protector and can have those traditional values and be strong, but be strong in vulnerability as well. Not necessarily just always be strong in terms of physicality, but be strong in the way they express their emotions, in the way that they open up, in the way that they talk about topics that might not necessarily be those pub topics that typically get discussed, but we can have those conversations as well. And Ilan, you mentioned a lot there about the confusion men have and in our mid-20s and finding those role models. And I think another thing that I've noticed with the podcast so far, in terms of what men tend to struggle with, is almost that ability to have that confidence to find something else, or to almost change in their lives. That we're fearful of changing. A lot of men are fearful of changing, fearful of going through that lonely chapter as well, where things are maybe going to transition from something that they're used to something that they're not used to. And that might look like losing some people along the way, not being so social along the journey, and not maybe having some people in their past life that now won't be in their present life. So almost going through that lonely chapter, being afraid to take that leap of faith, to take that leap into something else. And again, almost links to what we were talking about before, about that shame about your past self. And I think it all interlocks and interrelates. That fear of doing something a bit different, going against the grain, not working that 9 to 5, and maybe tapping into a little bit of creativity or doing something that is different to the friendship group, and almost going against what is traditional in a way. And yeah, that does come with having a bit of that lonely chapter again, which Chris Williamson has often spoken about. But it again, yeah, it's definitely a pivotal thing that I've noticed amongst guys in their mid-20s, being afraid to take that leap of faith and to do something different.
Jeremy, what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear. My biggest fear is probably not reaching the potential that I feel like I can reach. And I see that probably every day with the podcast, and it goes back to what you were almost asking before about what is the belief that needs to be changed, what belief I need to change. And I feel like the past 2.5 years, you've always got those people supporting you, whether it's friends, whether it's family, it's people saying, great job, good that you're doing this. But there's always like a but at the end of the conversation. It's always like, but do you feel like you will reach that level of getting a little bit more attractive, or do you feel like you will get bigger guests on, or do you feel like there's always a but at the end, and there's always a but do you think it's taking up too much time? And that but has always grinded my gears in a way, because I've always had this undeniable resilience and love towards the creativity side of things and towards doing this. And that is certainly the belief that I've needed to change, is to not listen to those voices, of people doubting whether it might get to the stage where other podcasts are. And that's where comparison comes into play as well. So changing my beliefs that the most important thing is I'm doing what I love doing, and I'm doing it because I see the value it is providing to people and providing to us as well. And not listening to that outside noise. So changing my belief there, and knowing that if I really truly stick to what I see right now and see where it is going and see the amazing impact it's making on those around us, then I shouldn't have the fear that I'm not going to reach that potential that I know I can reach. I shouldn't fear of that. I shouldn't listen to that, because all of that is just the outside external noise from the people around you that honestly might not get it, and that's okay as well. You won't expect everyone to get everything that you're doing. That's just human nature. We're not expected to understand something that everyone else is doing if you're not truly doing it yourself. So it's about blocking out that noise and really coming back to that core belief, that core trust in knowing that if you do something because you truly love it and you stay resilient at it, then that is all that matters, and your potential will be met if you keep having that undeniable relentlessness towards it.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome, brother. How about yourself, Ilan? Biggest fear?
Look, I once read the top 5 regrets of the dying.
Yeah.
And one of the top regrets was, I wish I lived a life more true to myself, not one that was expected of me by others. And when I read that line, it almost kind of activated something within me where I never thought I had a fear. I had maybe like a concoction of things that maybe I was uncomfortable with and so forth. And then reading that, and then kind of reading the passage on that, made me realize, I think this is it. I don't want to be someone who lives 80 or 90 years, hopefully I get that long on this earth, but someone that is on their deathbed and then ultimately thinks, well, I wish I should have done things a little bit differently. Because what happens is, sometimes there is a lot of courage required to live a life that is true to yourself. And that means taking the cost of maybe others criticizing you.
Yep.
I think, as you said, Jeremy, it's easy to get criticism in this space. It'd be very convenient to avoid that discomfort by just quitting it all and taking kind of the practical option. But in life, you're going to sometimes have to make what are impractical decisions for the sake of protecting who you are and what you want to do. And that is the cost of doing business. But I think ultimately it's not having that on your conscience, because even if everything fails, even if everything doesn't work out, you can still sleep at night knowing you gave it a red hot crack. And I think that's more liberating than doing something just because someone asked you to. My mum has always said to me, don't do something because you're obligated to, do something because you truly want to. And she told me that when I was going through a breakup with someone. And that really hit home. And not just in the relationship sphere, but in everything. I think we're very scared in our 20s because of ridicule. We're scared of what others might say, what family might say, to do the things that are true to you. And I think if you get good at the skill of doing things for yourself and doing so in such a way where you can be proud of yourself and commend yourself and remind yourself that this is the best path forward, you do go a long way. And you have a lot of pride. And I think if we were ever asking or writing a book on how do you create confidence, that's it. You create confidence by doing things for yourself, even when others might tell you otherwise. And I think it's overcoming those own doubts that can be really, really helpful.
Love it. Love it. On the show, I talk a lot about the law of exposure. I think we may have touched on it as well in our conversation. Is there anything in particular for both of you that really stands out that you were exposed to that kind of completely shifted your frequency or shifted the vibration of what is normal, right? I talk a lot about getting exposed to something that's not normal and normalizing it as quick as possible is the fastest way to make that something that you'll attract into your life. So is there anything that stands out for you boys, and Jeremy, you can jump in first again, that you were exposed to that really shifted everything for you?
Yeah, I think it's just your first bit of hate. I think everyone remembers their first bit of hate or their first bit of momentum where they can get, in the comment section where people might disagree with some of the things you're saying, and you hear the typical comments of, they just got to tax some podcast equipment, or not another blokey podcast, and we learned
one of the most number one fucking comments going around that. It does my fucking head in.
It's always from user 1753 million. It's always one of those
with zero
accounts.
posts.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think, definitely being exposed to a little bit of that, we learned to, again, embrace it and actually respond to it with a bit of love, with a bit of humor in a way. And sometimes
look at it empathetically as well, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yourself, how much is this person struggling, or how much of a low spot are they in?
Exactly.
To project this out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, it sticks out. I remember in the earlier days, a couple of years ago, I think we were having a conversation about, it might have been whether I think it was about male and female relationships or friendships whilst they are in relationships. And we made a video about that. And one of the comments initially started off with almost a bit of hatred and negativity towards us. But then we commented back with a question, and it's invited conversation. And then that person kept responding in a way where we were actually just conversing back and forth, and they ended up being a follower of ours. So it almost taught a lesson that not all bad exposure is actually bad. It might just be almost an opportunity for conversation, an opportunity for growth, for us to grow and for the person on the other side to grow. So that's one that sticks out as, just be exposed to all the good and all the bad, and see it as an opportunity for something greater as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely in the podcast space, but it's the idea of reaching out to some of the big name guests that we've had on, right? And it's getting used to communicating with them in such a way where, as you say, it's not necessarily like this feeling of abnormality. It almost feels like we're meant to be there. We're meant to be communicating with them. We're meant to be expressing logistical details about when to come on the pod and not, because I think when we first started the podcast, you and I were thinking about which kind of guests would we love to have on. And we would have dreamed, I think, back 2.5 years ago when we started to have some of the names that we have had on, because we may have seen them on TV, we may have seen them on our socials, and we would think it would feel weird to talk to them. But I think you said something on our podcast, which has personally stuck with me, which is if something feels abnormal and it's something that you want to achieve, or it's something that you were striving for, but it feels abnormal, chances are you weren't ready for it. It wasn't ready to be in your arms. And I'm not sure if I'm to receive. And something that I've noticed now is like, even coming on this show, I told Jeremy in the car, we're excited and we're nervous, but it's not that level of like imposter syndrome that we may have once experienced. And I think a lot of people say imposter syndrome will remain, and I think it does for ultimately everyone. But we become more comfortable and more confident in when we are reaching out to someone, for example, that we don't ever have a limiting belief now that we believe they're not going to come on. We wholeheartedly think and know in our heart of hearts that they have no reason to say no. And whilst that might sound arrogant, that might sound overconfident, I think for us, it's just that evidence just to confirm that we've done this a few more times now. We've done this prior. People have come on, have enjoyed themselves. So exposing us to that to those situations where you just have to reach out, hope they come on, hope they have a good time.
And if they don't, I think it's important not to take it personally, right?
Never.
It's never personal. I think the way that I've approached it throughout my time since I started the show is like if it's a no, if it's left on red, or if it's not even opening the message, it just means that I'm not able to provide enough value yet for that to make sense. But I think one of the important things that you both kind of alluded to there is never putting anything or anyone on a pedestal, right? Because essentially you're instantly saying that that's above you, firstly, but it's also separate from you. And as we've just kind of discussed, that is just not the case, and the longer you look at something on a pedestal, the more you're going to repel it away from you, right? And so it's like we spoke about before, the self-image side of things really, really important here, because you have to see that as a normal thing for yourself. And if it is not normal yet, it's just essentially putting yourself in those positions to normalize it as quick as possible to the point where it doesn't seem like something crazy. I think I shared on our conversation the percentage of people who win the jackpot in Tats Lotto or whatever. And then a very large portion of those people within a very short period of time have just blown it all. And it's because nothing about them suggests that they can hold that level of result, that level of finance, their habits, their self-image, their self-worth, environment, all of these things do not match, and it does not make sense. And so whenever I'm kind of like working towards anything, whether it's a desire, intention, or just a very tangible goal, that question has to remain the same every single day. If it fell in my lap right now, would it feel normal and would it make sense? And would I be able to hold the result? Because until that happens, there's no reason for it to happen.
Have you ever felt like something has fallen into your lap when it hasn't made sense?
No, because I don't think it can. I could be completely wrong. But the way that I see is that the universe will never put you in a situation or a circumstance that it doesn't know you can't, that it doesn't think you cannot hold. It doesn't think that you cannot navigate. And I think this is the thing, like when we get put in these positions and what that feels like is what we're discussing. It's like a mismatch in frequency. I think about it in the way of like, if there is going to be a huge spike in frequency, it means that I'm not ready for it yet, right? And essentially we're kind of getting to that point where it's almost an expectation. But when you find yourself in those circumstances that are very challenging, essentially a bit overwhelming, maybe a bit of imposter syndrome, like it's right where you need to be.
Yeah.
I often use the whole analogy around a PlayStation game and each level being the challenge or the opportunity for you to show that you're ready for the next one. And if you cannot pass it, it's not game over. You come back and you do it again until you can show that you're ready for what's next. But inevitably, each level that is going to be harder. It's meant to be. And to your point, I think you made a point earlier, Jeremy, around the imposter syndrome. I like to look at it like, okay, I'm going to give myself a very broad time frame here. I'm like, I don't expect to be good at this for the next 6 to 12 months. But what I've done is just given myself a license to be shit. Not even to be shit, a license to remove judgment based off how good or not great I am at something at the beginning. Because as we've touched on today, like the more reps you will then get in, the quicker you'll become competent at it, the quicker you'll become comfortable and normalize it. As we get towards the end of this conversation, there was a couple of questions that I thought I wanted to ask you guys today about each other, right? So Jeremy, you can go first. I'm going to put you both on the spot.
Love it.
What is one piece of advice or feedback, and this is just an opinion, right, that you feel Ilan could benefit from improving or getting better at? Like what's the area for him to really dive into that's going to essentially lead to more growth personally or professionally for Ilan? And secondly, what is it that you admire the most about him?
Wow.
I'm so glad you get to go first.
Awesome questions, firstly. I think where I think Ilan can grow more and where I think he can certainly improve, he's already doing a hell of a lot, but where he can get better is by maybe relaxing into himself a little bit more. And this goes hand in hand actually with the strength, because I think you're so beautifully spoken, so eloquently spoken, and you have such a voice of reason about you. But I think with that as well can always come a little bit of a balance as well, where the ability to sit back into what it would be like to have a conversation with Ilan where there doesn't need to be voice and reason always, and there can just be a voice of what it's like almost to be at the football together and to have a chat. That can give just another layer of exposure as to why people will love you even more, because they just get to see another layer of your personality, another voice that they might not often hear about and not often see. And I think that'll just elevate you even more. I think it just comes down to exposing more layers of ourselves, peeling away different layers of the onion so that we can eventually just be seen as more. And that just comes again with reps and with added exposure and added practice to conversation. And I think just with that, you'll skyrocket even further. And then that also leads into the strength of yours. I think you're so well versed in how you speak and in your opinions and your ability to articulate words and concepts in such a digestible way, which is so rare for people of any age, let alone our age. And I think that definitely provides a strength to you and a strength to the podcast and a strength to your work, is your ability to make things so complex into such a digestible way of thinking about and understanding concepts.
Jeremy, thank you very much. I got to be honest, this is something I've struggled with, because I'm thinking you're very well developed in a lot of ways, but something that I just thought of just before, it's the idea that I think one of your greatest strengths can sometimes be one of your greatest vulnerabilities. And I think it's your magnificent sensitivity. And I think sometimes when we've spoken about the podcast, you've mentioned certain people not listening, or maybe certain people giving unsolicited advice. And there's always been kind of a theme in these dialogues where I say to you, who gives a, and yeah, I don't know if we can swear on this potty, but
fucking oath.
Yeah, who gives a fuck? You are too concerned with what other people are saying. You're too sensitive to what they have to say. Who cares, right? Be more relaxed with it, which is funny coming from me because I'm the most jittery person, right? And I think the reason I say that is because, and this kind of ties into a quality I admire and I've been able to see you cultivate, is your unrelenting standards for not just yourself, but the work that you do. You give so much effort to the things you care about that you shouldn't even have time to think about what others might say, whether it be an unsolicited comment that might be hypercritical or one that might be disparaging. I think for the sake of you feeling better about our product, about yourself, about who you are as a person, get better at the skill of saying thanks, but no thanks.
Appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much. It's beautiful words.
Love you, man.
I love you too.
Oh, awesome, boys. Someone fucking get a tissue for me. That was really good. I appreciate you boys both being open and vulnerable about that. I wanted to put you on the spot so we can make it as raw as possible. But fellas, I really do appreciate you coming in today. It's been such a great conversation with you both, and I wouldn't have even asked you to come in if I didn't thoroughly enjoy our first conversation. So I think you're both doing an incredible job. And as I said earlier in the pod, like such a young age, but you already have so much value to offer, and you both are putting a shit ton of value out into the universe. And I'm really excited to keep watching both of your journeys because you're both doing incredible things. And even things like that, those two questions there, the more comfortable that you can both get with having those type of conversations, then the faster the growth ends up being for both of you. But I know the listeners would have taken a ton of value away from today's conversation, and so have I. So I appreciate you both being here, and I'm looking forward to staying connected. And we'll also have all the links to the boys' show and their socials in the show notes as well. But anything else you guys want to add?
Look, it's just, first of all, massive thank you for having us on and giving us this opportunity to come on. Jeremy and I are big fans of yours, of course. But I think ultimately, if we had a message about anything, it's about navigating uncertainty, and that if you put your best foot forward, things will be okay. And to take leaps of courage, not to think too far ahead, because most of the time things do sort themselves out on their own.
Beautiful.
No words to add to that. Beautifully said. Thank you very much, DK. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here, mate. And we love the work that we do, that you do, and we cannot wait to keep watching you do all the good stuff that you do as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, fellas. And for those who have tuned into today's episode, firstly, thank you. If you haven't subscribed to the show already, please do. And if you found today's episode valuable, which I have zero doubt that you would have, we'd love for you to share this episode with someone that you care about most, or share it on your social media. And again, I'll have the links to the boys' socials and their podcast below. Go and get around what they're doing. They're doing incredible work. And again, thanks for being here, fellas. That was great.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Awesome.
mate.